Full and uncut versions available on Patreon. Check in the description below.
Greetings once again, Pokemaniacs. Duuz-Diz-Din back again with more of the Pokemon Adventures manga, Black 2 and White 2 arc, where previously, Colress has managed to track down Zinzalin to Cold Storage in order to find information out that he knows about Kyurem, only for it to be revealed that Zinzalin has Kyurem. After Colress manages to subdue Zinzalin, Blake enters the fray, taking on Colress personally. Meanwhile, Whitley contacts her mother after her encounter with the new Team Plasma, finding out about the rift that was formed between the original Team Plasma, the machine that Colress has built, and the microchip that was in her pendant, now in the possession of Hugh, unbeknownst to her. Her mother tells her to get it to Rude and Groom, who have defected from Team Plasma, but as Whitley makes her way back to the rest of the class, it's only just in time for Hugh to announce that he plans on hunting down Team Plasma. And when Whitley tries to get involved, it's made very apparent to Hugh, especially after Shroom incapacitates the rest of the class, that Whitley is the former member of Team Plasma he's been after. However, this is interrupted as Getsis enters the fray aboard the Plasma frigate, and they end up freezing Castelia City with the power of Kyurem. Blake manages to sneak aboard in pursuit of Colress, just as Rude appears before Whitley, looking for the pendant. But when Whitley says that Hugh has it, it's revealed that he doesn't currently have it in his possession. Just then, Colress tries to capture Rude, but Whitley manages to dive in, taking his place. With her now captured, Blake plays along, pretending to be captured as well. But when he asks one too many questions, her previous conversation with Rude comes up, that many members have been captured by the international police. Whitley realizes that he is a member, and Blake handcuffs her, not placing her under arrest, but simply not wanting her to run away. A bit shattered by this revelation, Whitley decides that making things right is a lot more important than her own feelings, cooperating with Blake, especially as it means freeing Kyurem. But as they make their way to where Kyurem is being contained, they find the pod empty, Colress saying he's already gotten all the power he needs from Kyurem to freeze all of Unova, and he has Kyurem freeze Blake, Whitley, and Keldeo, and they're tossed into the ocean. Speaking of the ocean, where he left off seeing N flying aboard Zekrom, pursuing after the Lightstone, seems things are starting to wind down. So what'll happen next? Join me as I find out, won't you? Alright, it is Pokemon Adventures Black 2 and White 2 Volume 3. Also known as Volume 54, if you're going from the Japanese way of things being read out. We got White Kyurem, Keldeo in his, I don't know what the name of that is, form. Blake riding aboard Genesect. Honestly, gotta say, I wasn't expecting Genesect to be so involved in this story. We got White and Whitley, and seeing them side by side really pronounces the age difference. And I didn't notice it at first, but in the background behind White you have Black, and behind Whitley you have N. Two people that they care about and miss dearly. That's actually a very interesting contrast. Honestly, looking at it from that angle, it almost kind of makes Blake feel incidental. Oh man, that might just be the side of me that tends to hate on Blake a little too much. Or maybe not enough. Hard to say. Ooh, okay, a full lineup. Oh, thanks for kind of spoiling Blake's 6 Pokemon. But then again, Blake just keeps gaining Pokemon off screen. Maybe that's one of the disconnects I have too. We never really get to see him obtain a lot of his other Pokemon to a certain degree. I mean, we saw it with Oshawott. We saw in real time with, not Oshawott. I always forget the name of his Pokemon. Duat. We saw it in real time with Genesect. We saw a flashback with Keldeo. But Gliscor and Kabutops, they just feel like a necessary addition. There was nothing really grand about how he obtained them. Just Ash headquarters, and there you go. Again, there I go hating again. I just can't seem to stop. Oh, Black Team Plasma and White Team Plasma. That's an interesting way of looking at things. But yeah, man, the majority of the Seven Sages sided with the Black Team Plasma. It's interesting. I wonder why Root and Gorm decided to rebel. Was that also in the game? All right, so adventure number 17, Pink Slip. Interesting. Who's that Pokemon? Larvista. Oh, are we underwater? See several aquatic Pokemon. As someone's called out, Ren, Mr. Chirin. He's awake, Mr. Chirin. Chirin starts to stir, and he wakes up being surrounded by Roxy and his class. Chirin says, everyone, Roxy too, where are we? Suddenly someone comes in shouting, hey, you're awake, my dear classmates. I bet you're freezing cold. Come on, Volcarona, keep the fire going. Volcarona? Huh. Oh, I know who this is. It's Benga, Alder's. I had to double check because for the longest time, I thought son. But no, grandson. That makes a little bit more sense because they really make Alder out to be like he's in his, 60s or something? At the latest. Benga enters with Volcarona and, what's that other Pokemon? It's another one of those times where I'm just like, I only know the fully evolved form and the earliest form. Gibite. Benga and his Pokemon proceed to lay down, sticks and creating flames for everyone to heat up by. He says, here, as everyone is a bit shocked. Yuki says, this guy is, Chirin questions, classmate, who is he? Yuka says, what was his name again? Yuki says, how would I know? This guy was suspended on the first day of school and hasn't been back since. Why was he suspended? Chirin says, I was told there was a Class E student who started a huge brawl on the day of the enrollment ceremony and got suspended. His name was, Benga? Wanga? Banga? Wanga? Banga's taken off guard. He says, no, I'm Class E student number 6 of the 75th class of the trainer school. Benga! And it wasn't a brawl. It was a proper Pokemon battle. Yuki says, yeah, sure it was. We went back to the classroom after the ceremony and we see in a flashback all of the kids, finding their seat. Benga runs into the front of the class, looking around. The kids say, what? Who's he? Benga gestures to Hugh, Blake, and Leo, saying, you, and you. Bring it on! And he sends out a Gibble and Larvista. I can't see who Larvista is taking on Duat. Gibble is taking on Diano. Hugh is literally taking on Benga, while Blake motions for the girls to get out of the class. As Yuki says, there ended up being a huge 1-on-3 battle. The classroom was muddy and wet and scorched. Windows were cracked and walls were blown apart. Benga then says, when two trainers' eyes meet, a Pokemon battle must begin, right? That's I mean, you're not wrong. Yuki shouts, hey! While Chirin, grabs her by the shoulder saying, hey, there. Suddenly a voice calls out, whoa! You mustn't light a fire in a place like this. As suddenly we see a Jellicent male version putting out the fires that Benga started. Marlin says, Benga, you've got to be careful. Benga, gestures saying, really? My bad. Chirin says, oh, you're the new gym leader of Hamilao City. Gym, Marlin. Okay, so he gets to be in on the action too. And he's already a gym leader, of course. Marlin shakes Chirin's hand saying, it's been 2 years. Chirin says, long time no see. But as Marlin eyes Chirin, he says, you seem to be much better off compared to when I met you at the Pokemon League. All Chirin can do is blush a little, as Marlin explains, saying, you're inside the undersea tunnel that connects Undella Town to Hamilao City. The marine tube, right, Benga? Benga explains, saying, yeah, I didn't have anything to do while I was suspended, so I was spending time at Marlin's place. Oh, are they good friends or something? And I was scheduled to go back to school yesterday, so I had Marlin take me to school on the ship and found the school completely empty. I asked around and found out you had left for the Unova Choir tournament. So I chased after you guys, and just when I saw the harbor, we see Benga aboard the boat, seeing the massive flash of light that froze the city. Benga explains to them, they were passed out when it happened. Castelia City froze over. Everyone is shocked by this revelation. Benga says, I came ashore and saw people I knew lying on the ground, so I quickly carried you down here. Marlin then chimes in saying, The towns in Unova are being frozen by a flying ship. Sharon says, flying ship? Marlin tells him, I know it doesn't sound real, but it's true. Benga then adds in, that's why we're trying to gather people to fight back. Marlin then tells Sharon, everything's in chaos, and I haven't been able to get in contact with the other gym leaders. It's almost as though we're the only ones who are really prevalent to this story because we're all the new ones. It's actually interesting because you got Marlin, Roxy, Sharon, all the new gym leaders for Black 2 and White 2 teaming up. That's actually a good way of exhibiting them. And by having a smaller focus, you're able to just show them off a little bit more because, let's face it, all the other gym leaders really had good moments to shine in the previous story arc. Honestly, it's probably been the best showcase of gym leaders that I've seen in a hot minute to my knowledge. Marlin says, the only one I didn't manage to reach was Irish. She should be joining us sooner or later, of course, because also newer gym leader. Well, actually, no. She was a gym leader depending on which version of Black you got, either Black or White. It was either Iris or Drayden, I think. Pretty sure. Sharon says, Iris. Marlon then says, Sharon, Roxy, I need your help. Roxy says, no problem. Sharon says, okay. Maya says, Miss Sharon, Yuko says, Whitley and Blake aren't around. Sharon says, what? Yuki says, Hugh and Leo are gone too. Benga says, come to think of it, the 3 guys I beat up on the first day of school weren't around. Yuki says, you're the one who got beat up. Benga laughs, I'm just kidding. Buddy, nobody understands your sense of humor. Marlon then questions, a few girls were taking care of you at the harbor. Isn't it them? Sharon questions, girls? Marlon says, they should be back with the first aid equipment soon. Enter Whitley and the 2 now unhooded members of Team Plasma who are with Rude and their Gothorita, who are levitating boxes. Marlon says, there they are. Sharon comes running over to Whitley saying, Whitley, you're all right. But Whitley gives him a blank stare. Sharon says, huh? Marlon says, that girl can't speak? Marlon says, that girl can't speak. Sharon says, no? Benga says, she must be in shock. While the girls chatter amongst themselves, Yuki saying, do you remember what Hugh said? Yuki says, He said there was a Team Plasma member among the girls in Class E. Maya says, could it be? But if it was Whitley, she wouldn't have stayed behind. That's right. He was only making a blind guess. If Whitley was a bad person, she wouldn't have helped us after we were frozen. As we see the other members of Team Plasma putting blankets on the other students. The girls come running over, Yuki saying, thanks, Whitley. Maya says, are you okay? Yuki says, there's no need to worry, I'll help. the Zoroa just looks at him with this blank stare. Marlon says, the ship has frozen Castelia, Nasserine City, and Triton City. And it is now approaching Undell Town. The citizens of Undell Town and Hamulu City will be evacuating soon, so we need to prepare to fight. Sharon says, but I'm a school teacher. I need to find out if Blake, Hugh, and Leo are safe. Marlon says, right. And even if we are to find people, we need a viable way to get in contact with them. Sharon says, thank you. We then cut over to Aspiratia City, where we see Looker running through the back alley. He arrives at the little bar that Blake has as a secret hideout. He heads in, reaching into his coat saying, should be in the back, the metal. But as he goes for the little slot machine that works as the entrance, suddenly he's hit by something large and square. It's the magician carrying a massive sack. Looker says, magician, is the inspector here? Magician says, he's not. Looker then says, I haven't been able to get in contact with him since yesterday. I want to believe it, but maybe that attack from the ship. Magician says, move aside, it has nothing to do with me now. And as Magician makes his way out, Looker says, nothing to do with you? You are the inspector's personal... Magician says, he isn't an inspector anymore. Looker questions, what? But Magician says, Blake has been dismissed from the international police. What? Looker is just as in shock as I am. Like, what? Why? Looker questions, dismissed? I haven't heard anything about it. You're not even a member of the international police, so how would you even know? Magician says, true, I'm not a member of the international police, but I have more access to classified information than anyone else. one of the advantages of living in the underworld. Looker questions, Underworld? You mean you hacked into the International Police computer? Magician says, I was Blake's secret informant. I gathered information for him, checked his health, and provided him with the tools he needed. Unlawfully, I might add. In return, I was paid well and given backdoor access to the International Police's computer. Looker is shocked, saying, What? Magician says, Let me explain it to you slowly. Yesterday evening, I lost contact with Blake's health management monitor. I didn't understand what had happened, so I accessed the International Police's computer to check. Then I discovered a report that said Blake had taken out a dangerous Pokemon from the high security area without permission. Oh, that's how he gained access to Genesect. Looker remembers saying, the Genesect. Magician says, that's not all. The drives that the Pokemon equipped, the drives used to change the types of Technoblast. Blake had handed me the electric type drive, which was found on the Genesect when it was captured, and requested me to create a fire type, ice type, and water type as well. Looker says, What? Magician says, Sadly, I was only able to create the fire type drive, and mine was incomplete. But Blake grabbed it from me and took it with him yesterday. I warned him that there was a possibility that it would explode. Looker says, and the higher-ups found out about it. I'm surprised. Blake feels like he plays things so by the book. It's odd to find out he went so far rogue. Magician says, Exactly. This morning he was dismissed from the International Police. They managed to locate my laboratory here a short while ago, too. It was a strictly fly-by-night operation, and I'm doing just that. Goodbye, Magician says as he exits. But before he fully steps out the door, he says, Oh, I know. I'll tell you one more thing. I lost contact with Blake near the Sea of Castelia City. Blake's Pokemon Duat, Kabutops, Gliscor are all unconscious at the construction site of the Pokemon World Tournament. Oh, yeah. We cut over to the Pokemon World Tournament construction site where we see all three Pokemon laid out before the Shadow Triad. Oh, actually, gotta put in Gliscor. The Triad then says, They were quite tough. The International Police's Pokemon were well trained. The plasma frigate will be arriving in Undell Town soon. You'll wait for it at Homeloop City and board it there. Okay. And they all take off aboard the Forces of Nature. We see Striaton City completely frozen, and then we cut over to Fennel's laboratory, where radio broadcast says Lentimus Town frozen. We see Professor Juniper, but as there's both of the Juniper, and I never remember her name. Arya says, Lentimus Town has been frozen by the flying frigate? Castelia, Nasserine, Striaton, Mistralton, Opalucid. As far as we know, all these cities have been frozen. Cedric says, yes, I understand. Oh, okay, he was on his cross transceiver. As Cedric comes over to his daughter, and we also see Bianca there too. Arya asks, what did Mayor Dryden say? Cedric says, such an immense ice-type power. He has no doubt that Team Plasma has gotten a hold of Cura. Arya says, no. Cedric confirms. Arya questions, has he gotten in contact with the gym leaders? Cedric says, Verbank City's Roxy and Homeloop City's Marlon won't answer the gym leader hotline, and Chirin too. Bianca starts to cry, and Arya comes over, telling her, calm down, Bianca. And Bianca says, I've been calling Chirin on his cross transceiver several dozen times, but Black is gone, and if Chirin dies, Suddenly Amanita, who's complete in what? I forget what the Pokemon's name is. Yeah, Cub Shoe paraphernalia bursts in saying, everyone gather round. Arya asks, what's wrong, Amanita? Amanita says, Fennelly has finally figured it out. Fennel turns dramatically, saying, 2 years. It's been a long time. I've been searching for it ever since I got a hold of the Dream Mist, a place that may exist but may not exist like some other dimension. Arya then says, Fennel? This really isn't the time for... And the Fennel shouts, shut up, please. Oh, hey, Professor Burnett. Right, because she originally, from what I remember, appeared in some side game. I know her mostly from Sun and Moon, after she gets that nice tan. But she's from Pokemon Dream Radar. Yeah, she ends up playing a much more important role once you get to Sun and Moon. Fennel says, I talked to you about Professor Burnett, right? Arya says, uh-huh. She's your friend from university who loves wrestling. Loves wrestling. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, that explains so much about her relationship with... Oh, we'll get there when we get to it. Fennel says, that's right. The research that Burnett and I did was the key to this breakthrough. The Pokemon Dream World. The time has come to find out if my hypothesis is correct. When Reshiram turned back into the Lightstone, Black was dragged inside by the contracting energy. Bianca is shocked as Fennel continues on saying, the inside of the Lightstone is connected to the Pokemon Dream World, and Black is still alive there. That's my hypothesis. Bianca runs up and grabs Fennel by the collar saying, where is it? This Pokemon Dream World. What town? What city? What route? What mountain? Jesus. Fennel tells her the center of a place called the Eternalink. That is the place where dream energy gathers the most. And I believe that's where the Pokemon Dream World and our world connect. Bianca drags Fennel out saying, Eternalink, we've got to hurry. Fennel says, I've already sent someone to check. Bianca questions, who? Suddenly, someone is on Fennel's cross transceiver saying, me, Bianca. And Fennel, I found it. The Lightstone, says White, approaching the Lightstone that's just sitting at a weird spot. Huh. Oh, also, we've got White's superior. White goes over and picks up the Lightstone, and as she hugs it, she says, I found Black. Aww. But suddenly, a gust of wind blows past White as we see the shadow of Zekrom, and behind her is N. Oh boy. And a lot happened in that chapter. On to the next one. Adventure number 18. N returns. Who's that Pokemon? I hate this name. Alomomala. Oh, it's spelled the same way backwards and forwards. There's a name for that. I can't remember what it is, though. But White turns in shock, saying, N. N stands there silently. But suddenly, something stomps behind White. It's Zekrom. White spontaneously brings out all of her Pokemon, all at the ready. But suddenly, her Pokemon kind of turn to her, just a little bit perplexed. White communicates with her Pokemon saying, what? It's not going to attack us. She turns to N saying, you're not going to steal the Lightstone with Black still trapped inside? But N smiles saying, I see that you can still hear the voices of the Pokemon, White. She understood them so clearly in that instant. That was actually really nice. N says, I could tell from Gigi and the others that you have loved them and taking good care of them. I'm glad I entrusted them to you. But White turns away, pushing, what are you doing here? Why hasn't Zekrom turned back into the Darkstone? Why? Why? Why did only Reshiram turn back into the Lightstone? He shakes, saying, why? Why? And looks down dejectedly, saying, I'm sorry, I don't know either. The reason Zekrom won't turn back into the Darkstone, and the reason I'm here, is what Zekrom wanted. Only Zekrom has the answer to that question, he says, looking at Zekrom. Suddenly, Zekrom scoops up White, much to her shock. And as N sits down next to her in Zekrom's arms, he says, Zekrom wants to go with the Lightstone. White turns to Zekrom, questioning, go where? N tells her, to meet Kyurem. Is that a good thing, though? Zekrom takes off with N and White, with N saying, White, have you heard of Kyurem, the boundary Pokemon? White says, yes. Drayden told me about it. Zekrom, Reshiram, and Kyurem were originally one dragon. When Zekrom and Reshiram split into two, the remaining empty shell became Kyurem. N tells her, Kyurem has started to make its moves, and is calling for Zekrom and Reshiram in order to absorb them. White says, absorb? Then are you saying Zekrom is heading over to meet Kyurem to get absorbed by it? N tells her, apparently. The more Kyurem wields its power, the stronger Zekrom is drawn to it, to the point that it is irresistible. White pauses and then says, you realize that a flying frigate is going around freezing Unova cities, right? And nods, saying Getsus and his men are using Kyurem to do it. White questions, then what is going to happen when Zekrom and Kyurem merge together? Are you thinking about using its power to become the king of Team Plasma again? She says, pulling the Lightstone away from White, and then stands up, saying, would you listen if I just said no? He then gets onto the back of Zekrom, saying, that is why I must prove it. I must show that my mind has been freed from Team Plasma, and I have no intention of bringing harm to Unova again. I will stop my father, Team Plasma, and Kyurem. Oh, I had something else I needed to tell you, White. The Lightstone suddenly appeared when I was flying in the air with Zekrom. Okay, so he wasn't chasing it. It just showed up in front of him. White says, what? And tells her, it kept flying next to us for a while. The Lightstone started to quickly descend when it reached the sky above Eternally. It was as if it noticed you down below and flew down for you to find it. White looks to the Lightstone in shock as the Lightstone blushes? Question mark? But N suddenly says, there it is. Ah, they see the plasma frigate from the distance, and Hiram seems to take notice, turning its head. Aboard the frigate, the plasma grunt says, there is a flying object at 5 o'clock. Korra says, ah, it's Zekrom, just as I thought. Hiram's rise in power drew its partner to it. Do you see it, Getsus? Getsus says, yes, I see it. I see the other one, who used to be my son. A grunt says, report from the stern of the frigate. Hiram is apparently creating a ruckus. Korra says, so impatient, oh well, time to go out, he says, wielding his device. But Getsus tells him, hold it, my friend, and we'll definitely fight back. I know all of his weaknesses and shortcomings. Korra hands over the device, saying, I see. Here, this is to control Hiram. He can take care of it. As Korra walks away, he says, oh, by the way, I won't accept you going easy on him because of something like that, like parental affection. He says, turning with a wink. Getsu says, parental affection. I've never had parental affection of any sort. I guess that really tells you how much he actually cared about his adopted son and adopted daughters. And as if we had any more of a reason to think that this guy was a jerk. Okay, it's starting to dawn on me. Are Chorus and Getsus wearing the exact same suit? Just Getsus is wearing a cloak? Because looking under his cloak, I see the button and stuff. As Getsus gets on the back of Hiram, we hear a report coming over the comms. Raising lift, opening hatch. Hiram has departed. As Hiram sets out, with Getsus on back, it comes face to face with N and Zekrom, father and son, meeting again. Oh, and they instantly clash. Just beating on each other in the sky. Getsus with this sickening smile, and N looking all too serious. They break off from each other after the initial clash. N calls out, White, are you alright? White says, of course not. N says, stay out of this battle. If I am defeated, Zekrom will be absorbed like Hiram, and after that, the Lightstone will be in danger too. The Lightstone will react to Hiram and turn back into Reshiram. When that happens, White questions, when that happens? And says, please tell him. Tell Black. Take care of the rest for me. Oh, jeez. He's not expecting to walk away from this all right. Okay, Hiram and Zekrom start to power up. As White takes off on her Volibee, he calls out to N. Getsus tells Hiram to use Glaciate, while N tells Zekrom to use Fusion Bolt. The massive flash as the two clash blinds White and Volibee, despite the fact that they're not even looking in that direction. But we then pick up with Blake in a cave, water dripping on his forehead. He wakes up to see Keldeo looking at him. Blake says, Keldon. Gets up looking around, finding himself in an odd cave filled with ruin. Blake questions, where are we? Keldeo says, this is a cave at the bottom of the sea. Blake then questions, was that you, Keldon? Keldeo says, yes. Blake questions, why could I hear your voice? Keldeo says, I don't know. I was speaking this entire time, you just weren't listening. Blake says, this is no ordinary cave. It was clearly made by someone. It's a ruin or something. Maybe it is a special place that allows me to understand what the Pokemon are saying. We were attacked by Hiram on the ship, right? Keldeo says, yes, we were frozen. Actually, yeah, how did you get unfrozen? This keeps happening. They get frozen and then they get mysteriously unfrozen sometimes. Well, thankfully it wasn't like a year or months at a time. Keldeo explains, saying, but you saw the ice attack coming and gave me an Asper berry beforehand. So I managed to escape from being frozen shortly after we were thrown into the sea. Oh, okay. Keldeo for the win. And Blake was thinking on his feet the entire time. Good stuff. Wait, where's Whitley? Blake questions, and you swam all the way down here? You knew about this place? Keldeo says, no. The voices of mentors guided me. Blake questions, the voices of your mentors? Keldeo tells him this way, point motioning to a direction. And as Keldeo leads Blake, they discover the frozen figure of the, frozen stuck together. Blake saying Cobelion, Ryzion, and Tracheon. Keldeo questions, you know them? Blake says, from a report by the Striaton gym leaders on the P2 laboratories thing 2 years ago. They were attacked by Genesec's technoblasts and fell into the sea. Yeah, see, that makes me question how Keldeo is so cool with working with Genesec, because I don't know, is this the same Genesec that froze them, or maybe not? Keldeo says, their voices may have reached me because we were here too. Blake looks at the frozen figure saying, marks left by a sword. Do you create these marks? Keldeo says yes, with Sacred Sword, but I was unable to break through the ice. And shoot, I don't know. I'd be worried about it trying to cut them free of that. And it's been 2 years. I'm surprised that they'd be okay being frozen for so long. But, Pokemon World works different. Blake says, if this was any ordinary ice type attack, you would have been able to. The Technoblast is a move that has been enhanced by technology. If they were sealed by ice by Technoblast, then wouldn't it be possible to free them with Technoblast? Yeah, and he just so happens to have the fire disc. So he brings out Genesect. As Genesect gets ready, Blake says, let's give it a try. Keldeo says, And Blake says, Genesect must have been equipped with the chill drive when it froze Cobelion and the others, but luckily it is equipped with a burn drive now. It can be used to shoot out a fire-type Technoblast. Blake looks at Keldeo saying, what's wrong, Keldon? Are you worried? Suddenly a voice calls out, of course. Whitley approaches. Blake saying, Whitley, huh? The handcuffs. Just looking at his wrists. Whitley says, I don't know. They had already fallen off when I woke up. Keldeo then says, and I didn't cut them off either. Blake questions, why didn't you escape? Whitley says, I cannot abandon someone who is in need of help, no matter who that person may be. Ooh, dang. Keldeo explains, saying your body was so cold, so she kept rubbing your body, but you wouldn't wake up. So when she went looking for something that would warm you up, they're children. They're children. Let's just move past that. Whitley says, you said you would attack Keldeon's mentors with the move that caused them to end up in this state, and then asked if Keldon was worried about it. If Genesect uses that move, it could cause a huge explosion, right? How can you do something so cruel? Blake questions, what is cruel about it? Whitley questions, what? Blake says, I see no reason to hesitate to use the most effective method. The Technoblast explodes and Genesect is injured, and I just need to heal it. If we fail to save Cobelion this way, we can think of another way after that. See, that's what I'm talking about. Genesect has this look like, bro, what? Like, bro. I can I have a say in this? Blake very plainly says, fear and sympathy are emotions that I will never understand. Whitley takes this in, while Keldeo looks shook. He thinks to himself, no, this human is not like my mentors. He isn't willfully suppressing his emotions. This human has no. But Blake says, Genesect, Technoblast. Genesect does it, blasting the figure and freeing the swords of justice. Keldeo is overjoyed, calling out to Cobelion, but Cobelion looks to Genesect, seeing that it's suffering, and brings out its sword, wrenching free the heat drive right before it explodes. Jeez. Okay. I mean, it got the job done, but my god, that was kind of cold-blooded. Genesect looks to Cobelion, who simply looks away. Tracheon says, thanks a lot, Genesect. Ryzion says, you saved us. Cobelion then tells Keldon, he says, you mustn't hesitate, Keldon. Oh, wait, is he calling him that because that's his new name? Or is he acknowledging, he should. He did save him. Cobelion says, trust yourself for choosing this human as your master. You must have resolve and follow him. And you must defeat the true enemy. Keldeo, still a little bit hesitant, looks towards Blake. Blake, not even looking at him, after putting on his hat, gets out a tablet from his bag, saying, good, I have reception here. And he tries to sign in, saying, can't access the International Police surveillance satellite. Suddenly, a beeping starts on his tablet, and a text comes up on his tablet reading, warning, Black number 2. You have been relieved of your duty. You will be stripped of your authority as a member of the International Police. and will be unable to use any international police equipment. I mean, you really shouldn't be in shock by that. You did really do some stuff that kind of, like, the stealing a genesect. I don't know how you were gonna kind of get around that, man. I really don't know. It's really hard to say if Blake really has no emotion, because he should have known that there would be some form of consequence for taking genesect, and yet he seemed so shocked that he was relieved of duty. But if he was acting on, emotions, it would explain why he did something that was so rash. I don't know. Alright, this is the last chapter of this video. Adventure number 19, Abyssal Ruins. Who's that Pokemon? Shelmet. Oh, okay. Yeah. Blake reads through the note and simply closes his eyes, saying, I've been fired. I see. That's why the handcuffs came off. He then thinks to himself, I can't check what is happening outside, nor can I use my international police equipment. So having only Keldon and Genesect with an injured back to fight is a little worrying. It won't be easy to capture those three, he says, looking toward the swords of justice. He then notices 3 other Pokemon, saying, there are wild Pokemon in this cave, too. Meanwhile, Whitley looks over to Blake and then comes over to the Swords of Justice, saying, may I ask Keldon's mentor something? Why did you tell Keldon to go with them? Wait, can she hear them too? So, is it just this place that allows you to hear Pokemon? She looks to Keldeo, saying, Keldon is worried and doubts whether it should take orders from him. He was worried that Blake may not care about the lives of the Pokemon, since he lacks the emotions of fear and sympathy. Virizion and Terrakion look towards Cobalion with a smile, and then Cobalion says, we have a question for you too. You want to stop the humans who are using Kyurem's power so you can save Kyurem, right? Whitley says yes. Keldeo says, we need to stop those humans, and this human will help us. Oh wait, no. Cobalion says, we need to stop those humans, and this human will help us. We shall fight together. Emotions such as fear and sympathy are not needed to fulfill that goal. A strong will and calm judgment are what we need most right now. Cobalion then looks to Blake, saying, we can determine whether that human is worthy of our trust or not after we deal with the crisis at hand. And it's a very pragmatic thing to say. It's just like, look, we just need to get the job done. The other stuff, that could wait till after the crisis is passed. But Whitley seems still worried, and Virizion and Terrakion look to each other. Virizion then tells Whitley, we would like to thank you for caring about Keldeo. Terrakion then adds, I'm glad we can tell you that thanks to this unique place. Whitley questions, thank me? The things I've been doing to help the Pokemon may have been just for me. It's hard enough for humans to understand each other's feelings and thoughts, even when we speak the same language. So how could I have thought that I'd understand what Pokemon want when I can't talk to them? Virizion adds, humans have a tendency to make the judgment that the Pokemon's expressions and gestures are the same as humans. But those differ from Pokemon to Pokemon. Smiling does not necessarily mean that it's bored. It's not smiling and jumping because it's happy. Licking a face is not a sign of affection, and so on. Terrakion then says, putting his horn around Whitley, almost like it's an arm, saying, let's not rush or feel scared about searching for the answer to how the relationship between humans and Pokemon should be. Whitley takes this in, and meanwhile, Blake is looking at the hieroglyphs of the ruins, saying, an ancient glyph. They talk about the ancient king. Ancient king? Okay. With all this talk about ancient kings, I wonder if this ties in at all to X and Y, if you know anything about that. But Whitley then chimes in saying, is there anything I can help you with? Blake pauses and then says, I need to ask you to do something. I want you to capture the Karablas. We need more Pokemon that can fight to save Kyurem, and you'll need to protect yourself as much as possible. Whitley, have you ever captured a Pokemon? Whitley is aghast, saying no. And Blake then hands over a Pokeball, saying, try using this quick ball. And Whitley just, you can see the life drain from her face. The idea of catching the Karablash just overwhelming her. Fungus is obviously just got it done with her shenanigans, leaping off her head, tossing the Pokeball towards the Karablash. And it seems like it's very pleased with itself. Whitley questions, Fungi, how can you do this? I've trapped it, the Pokeball, and But over comes Blake with his Pokedex saying, okay, now let's trade it with my Shelmet. Place the ball on your Pokedex. Okay, how does trading work when you don't have a Pokedex? If this is how this works, well, the trade happens, and instantly their Pokemon evolve. Karrablast evolves into Escavalier. Well, Blake's Escavalier now. Well, Shelmet evolves into Whitley's Accelgor. Whitley says it's changed shape. Blake tells her, some Pokemon can only evolve by being traded like this. Karrablast evolved into Escavalier, and Shelmet evolved into Accelgor. Whitley looks at the Pokedex. Man, we haven't really looked at a Pokedex in a while. And we rarely do it in this story arc. But Whitley reads the Pokedex entry, saying Shelmet, the snail Pokemon. When it and Karrablast are together and both receive an electrical, they both evolve. Electrical impulse was the word. Okay, it was covered up by the Pokedex. Like says, Escavalier's armor originally belonged to Shelmet. An electrical impulse. Whitley takes this in and then thinks, the Pokedex, maybe I could use this to actually help Pokemon? Exactly. See, there are multiple ways to help the Pokemon. Blake then says, I know, since we're here, I want to talk with you, Fungi. Tell me more about yourself. And as Fungus, coughs a little and gets ready to talk, suddenly there's a scream. Oh, as Whitley says, the cave is starting to fill with water. Cobellion says, this rune will detect any moving creature and will forcefully wash them outside after a certain amount of time. How very convenient. Caldeon says, we must escape. Get on my back, you two. But as Blake gets on Keldio's back, Whitley takes a moment and comes over to the Swords of Justice, giving a bow saying thank you very much. Cobellion's just always turning away, but I love the fact that Virizion and Terrakion are always smiling like, you're a good kid. And so, probably because of Keldio's abilities, bubbles are formed around Keldeo and the Swords of Justice, allowing them to make their way out into the ocean and up towards the surface. Oh, we suddenly cut over to Hugh, who wakes up sneezing. Hugh says, is this the trainer school facility room? I thought I was at Castelia City. What's going on? Suddenly a voice calls out, you're awake. It's Rude, who also has yes, Chandelure. I actually really love Chandelure. I just think it's neat. A lot of my favorite Pokemon here. And in an instant, Hugh brings out Electros and tells it to use Crush Claw on Rude, which sends him flying into a bookshelf. He says, I know you. Those clothes. You're one of Team Plasma's 7 sages. What did you do to me? Rude says, as he tries to get up, if you'll hear me out, I, Rude, will explain everything to you. He says, shut up. You'll listen to what I have to say first. Give back the Purloin you guys stole from my sister 5 years ago. Rude says, 5 years ago? Purloin? He says, you don't like that transfer student, I bet. But as Rude is helped up by Chandelure, he says, the Hugh siblings from Aspiratia City. That Purloin was the first Pokemon Team Plasma liberated. No, abducted. It was taken by a male and female member at Route 19. Hugh says in shock, you know about that? Rude nods and says, don't worry, your sister's Purloin is safe. It is being well taken care of by a certain someone. He says, then take me to that certain someone. Rude says, not now. He says, I knew you'd say that. Rude says, remember the flying frigate that shot out a ray of light at Castelia City? He says, yeah. Rude says, that is a frigate controlled by Team Plasma. They use the energy of a legendary Pokemon called Kyurem to freeze Castelia City. It's not just Castelia. 70% of Unova has been frozen in ice now. I'll take you there after we stop that frigate. He says, then hurry up and stop it. It's you who froze Unova in the first place. Rude says, Team Plasma is currently divided into 2 fractions. The Black Team Plasma, which is currently freezing Unova, and us, the White Team Plasma, which opposes them. Hugh thinks himself saying, Black Team Plasma? Those guys I saw at Castelia Sewer. Rude tells him, the room is being controlled by a device called the Colress Machine, and it's creating havoc under the orders of the Black Team Plasma. The White Team Plasma is trying to neutralize the Colress Machine, and in order to neutralize it, we need the memory card you found, Hugh. Please, give the memory card back to us. Oh, suddenly enter the members of Black Team Plasma. saying, "We won't let you neutralize it," Sage Rude. Rude says, "You followed me." The grunts say, "We have received orders to silence you for betraying us." They all bring out their Pokemon, but as their Pokemon attack, he protects him with his Electros and Vibrava. Rude says, "Phew." He says, "I can't believe what a softie I am. This may all be a trick to try and get the memory card back from me." But he brings out the key, saying, "This is the only choice I have left." He hands over the key to Rude, saying, "My room is on the 3rd floor of this building. The door has a label with the Leo's and name in mind. I've hidden the memory card inside the picture frame on my desk. I'll stop these guys. You go and stop Kira." Rude heads out saying, "Thank you, Hugh. I promise that I shall return Purloin to you." As Rude enters the room, he sees the picture on the desk, saying, "This must be it." He sees the picture of Hugh, his sister, and the Purloin. Rude dwells on the picture, and as he takes out the memory card from the back, he says, "Forgive me. Forgive me," and he takes the memory card. Meanwhile, the airspace around the plasma frigate, the showdown between Ghetsis and Kiram versus N and Zekrom continues. Zinzalin is still hanging from the ceiling in the plasma frigate next to Colress. As Colress says, how long is he going to keep fighting? It looks like Kiram has an advantage, but it hasn't tried to absorb Zekrom at all. Zinzalin says, "It's not about who has the advantage in battle," only for his goggles to be thrown at him. Colress says, "You really are a fool. You'll go to great lengths to act like you know something when you actually don't. You don't want to make a deal, but you don't get the situation you're in right now. Fine, you don't need to tell me. You're being such a pain, I'll just force it out of you." BM? Jeez. BM starts to attack Zinzalin's mind, and as Zinzalin cries out in terror, it then says, "In order to complete the process of fusion, you need the DNA splicers. It originally belonged to Kiram, but when I captured it, it did not have the DNA splicers. But if Kiram desires it, they should answer its call." Korra says, He gets on the radio, saying, "Ghetsis, my friend, order Kiram." Meanwhile, back in the ocean, as Keldeo and the Swords of Justice alongside Blake and Whitley make their way up to the surface, White notices something in Blake's bag. She says, "Your bag's shiny." As Blake takes it out, Whitley questions, "What's that?" Blake says, "Something I've had since I was young." Whitley questions, "Did someone give it to you?" Blake says, "I don't know. I was an orphan infant the police saved from a scene of a crime." Oh. Whitley questions, "Infant? As in baby?" Blake explains, "I was raised by the international police." Actual child soldier? After numerous tests and examinations, they discovered that I had a brilliant mind and physical prowess. So they taught me how to be an investigator. I lacked the ability to understand emotions, other people's and my own. That is why I studied and memorized numerous communication manuals and ran simulations on how I could approach my target without being suspected. I mastered every possible communication pattern and how it should be applied in order to hold a perfect conversation in any situation. He really is like Lloyd from Spy Family. But this strategy failed to produce results. They'll have to make a report that they need to update the manual. And then Blake seems to realize something, saying, "I've been relieved of my duties as an international police investigator. I don't need to make that report." Whitley questions, "Relieved? You're not an inspector anymore?" Blake says, "That's right." Whitley then questions, "Then why? Are you going to save Kiram?" Blake says, "I don't understand the difference between right and wrong either. So the investigator who raised me, the current commissioner of the International Police, taught me you must arrest and deal with criminal individuals and violent and destructive organizations, even if you have to ignore and violate the human rights of ordinary citizens." Jeebus! That is a really murky thing to say. But Blake says, "I will follow what I have been taught, so that is why I'm going to save Kiram and destroy Team Plasma, even if I have been dismissed from my job. That is the only way of living that I know of." That's a little sad. That's kind of depressing. But yeah, I was kind of wondering why he was going along with this too. But I figured maybe it was just that he wanted to see the mission to the end, but no, it's just all he knows. Okay, is that the DNA splicer? And suddenly the thing in Blake's hand, lifts him up, kind of stretching the bubble that they're in with Keldea. Whitley says, Inspector. Frisian says, what's wrong, Keldon? Keldea says, I don't know. It's as if I'm being dragged up by a powerful force. Oh, geez, wow. What were the odds? As they burst out of the water, they see that they're right below the showdown between Kiram and Zekrom. As Whitley opens her eyes, he spots N on the back of Zekrom, calling out, pushing N? But Blake is drawn while the orb in his hand is drawn towards Kiram, and it knocks him off. Blake drops. As Whitley says, Keldon, stop. Blake falls into the water. Whitley looks between the two, saying, Inspector, N. But naturally, Keldeo dives into the water after Blake, watching from a nearby rock in the ocean. Blake says, what was that? Getsus sees the object in front of him, saying, are those, Coda says, the DNA splicers? Splicers, plural? Wouldn't it just be the DNA splicer? Why are you making it sound like there are multiple? And why would Blake have had it for such a long time? And says, what? I see. We were too late. Chorus calls out, Zinzalin? Are those the DNA splices? But Zinzalin can only just mumble to himself as he's bleeding and drooling. Chorus says, what? Has he lost his mind? Oh well. Gessus, my friend, order Kiram to absorb Zekrom. And Gessus, before Gessus can do that, the orb starts to shift and turn and transform. Chorus says, oh. As the DNA splicer takes in a more triangular shape and embeds itself into Kiram's head, some of the parts around Kiram's wings start to shatter. Gessus says, As what seemed like Kiram's wings, one reaches out to Zekrom and the other reaches out to the light orb. N calls out to Zekrom. Zekrom rushes in. The Kiram then directs itself fully towards Zekrom. 2 beams fire out of its wing-like appendages, 4 beams, and surround Zekrom. Zekrom starts to shine. White calls out, this is N, get away from Zekrom! But it's too late, as both N and Zekrom are sealed within the Darkstone. White calls out, what? N2? The Darkstone starts to, the Lightstone starts to glow in White's grasp, while the Darkstone moves towards Kiram. Cora says, look, Zinzalin, it's going to happen. This is what you've been waiting for. Kiram is going to perform Absolution. Suddenly, the Lightstone starts to slip from White's grasp, but she still holds on to it as she's lifted into the air. The Lightstone starts to shine, and then she bumps into something. A hand grabs her shoulder, and she looks up, saying, what? Oh, that's a heck of a cliffhanger. Man, there is a lot going on in these chapters, but I'm glad I finally feel like I understand Blake just a little bit more. And actually fully knowing that moment makes me kind of sympathize with him. He's not called into Tatch without a reason. And now knowing that, it's just like, oh, so you really don't have anything else. Man, that's kind of sad. Dang. But I'm glad that we freed the Swords of Justice, and that they ended up bonding so quickly to White. Maybe a little too quickly? It's hard to really say. And that moment where Blake just kind of dismissed Genesik's well-being, I don't know how... I'd love to have known what Genesik was thinking in that moment. We're about to see Black though, and I can't wait for that. But, man, White is trying her best. I commented on the fact that it didn't really feel like White was really getting her own adventure, but she was kind of having it. It was this desperate search for someone she cares about deeply. And Whitley's really growing into her own. I love her care. That's really the highlight. She cares so much. While she does care about N, and she does still have that obsession, you're getting to see that there's something deeper there. Her care for Pokemon is so genuine, and that is such a good thing. So, yeah, not really much else to say, despite how much content there was. It kind of sucks that N wasn't really able to do too much in the end. And why did Blake have the DNA splicer? I would love to know what that's about. Well, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the ride. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and hope to see you later. So then, take care. Bye-bye.